For generations they told us, Africa must wait. Africa must bow. Africa must ask permission. But I stand before you to declare, those days are gone. A new wind is blowing across the Sahel, across the deserts and the rivers, across the lands of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And at the center of this mighty wind is something so small in appearance, yet so mighty in meaning. A passport, not just a booklet of paper and ink, not just a card to cross borders. No, my friends, this is a testimony. This is a declaration. This is a symbol of dignity, claimed, not given. The alliance of Sahel states has lifted up a new standard, and with it comes a story that shakes the halls of Europe, rattles the chambers of Washington, and forces the world to ask a question it has long avoided. Can Africa decide for itself? Stay with me, beloved, for this journey is more than news. It is revelation, it is struggle, it is hope. And if you believe Africa deserves to stand tall, I ask you, subscribe, join this family, and walk with us into the truth. Beloved, let us go back to the month of January, in the year of our Lord, 2025. The eyes of the world turned, not to Paris, not to Washington, not to Brussels, but to Bamako, to Niamey, to Ouagadougou. 3 nations, weary from decades of broken promises and heavy yokes, lifted their heads and declared before heaven and earth, we are no longer servants of another's table. We are builders of our own house. These nations, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, had only months earlier made a decision that shook West Africa to its core. They broke away from ECOWAS, a regional body once hailed as the shield of unity, but long since seen as a chain of dependency. For many citizens of the Sahel, ECOWAS had become not a brotherhood, but a burden. It was bureaucracy without compassion, policy without people, unity in name, but not in truth. And so these 3 nations walked away, carrying with them the fire of self-determination. And they did not walk alone. They formed the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. Not a loose gathering of politicians, not a fragile coalition of convenience, but a covenant of sovereignty. From the very beginning, they built institutions. A central bank to guard their own wealth, a judiciary to uphold justice on their own terms, a common flag to wave not under another empire's shadow, but under their own sun. Every act was a stone laid in the foundation of sovereignty, every announcement a trumpet blast declaring, we are not children to be disciplined, we are nations to be respected, but, my brothers and my sisters, of all the stones they laid, of all the banners they lifted, one stood higher, brighter, and bolder than the rest. It was the act of unveiling the AES Passport. Yes, a passport. At first glance, an ordinary thing. A booklet, a chip, a photograph, paper that most people ignore until they stand at a border. But in that moment, in that ceremony broadcast across Africa, it became far more than a travel document. It became a declaration of existence. It became a sermon of freedom. It became a key to a new identity. Picture it. Across the capital cities, people gathered to witness. Some watched on television, others stood in the squares, children sitting on their parents' shoulders, elders lifting their hands in prayer. The leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso stepped forward, not with apology, not with hesitation, but with boldness. They held up the passport and proclaimed, "This is ours. This is Africa deciding for itself." For the student in Bamako, it was a door to learning in Cairo or Nairobi, no longer under the shadow of colonial approval. For the trader in Niamey, it was a chance to carry goods across borders with dignity. For the family in Ouagadougou, it was hope that if sickness struck they could travel abroad for healing without humiliation. In their hands, that little booklet was not just paper. It was possibility. It was protection. It was promise. And hear me, this passport was not a hollow symbol. No, the leaders had already worked with the International Civil Aviation Organization to guarantee recognition. The AES Passport's standing was affirmed under international law. Mali's Minister of Security, Ali Mohammed, declared to the world that it carried the same legal weight as any ECOWAS document. It was not fantasy. It was not a dream. It was legal. It was legitimate. It was real. The celebration was loud, but the meaning was deeper still. Because a passport, my friends, is never just about travel. It is about dignity. It is about identity. It is about the right to stand at the gate of the nations and say, Here I am, not as a beggar, but as a citizen of the world. And for the people of the Sahel, long spoken of only in terms of poverty, war, and instability, this passport was proof that their story was not only about suffering, it was also about sovereignty. From Bamako to Niamey, from Ouagadougou to the villages of the desert, citizens lined up to receive their new document. Some kissed it as they held it in their hands. Some raised it to the sky as if to dedicate it to God. Some wept quietly, remembering ancestors who had been stripped of every paper, every right, every name. Now their descendants stood with a passport that belonged to no empire but to themselves. But, beloved, history is a stern teacher. Every declaration of freedom, every step toward dignity, is tested. And though the music of celebration filled the streets, there was a whisper rising in the background. A whisper that would grow louder, a shadow moving beneath the sunlight. The people rejoiced, yes, but storm clouds were gathering. For the story of the AES Passport was not finished. What began as pride would soon be tested by rumor, by rejection and by resistance. And the question was not only, can a passport open borders, but can a people withstand the storm of doubt? Beloved, you heard it already. Joy does not walk alone. Where there is dignity, there will be doubt. Where there is sovereignty, there will be schemes. And so it was with the AES Passport. Not long after the cheers had risen, not long after the flags had waved, a whisper began to move. At first, it was small, just a rumor on a corner of social media, just a careless word on a cafe radio. But like fire in the dry grass, it spread. The whisper turned into a headline. The headline turned into a storm. And the storm said this: West rejects. France refuses. Europe denies. Even China turns its back. Do you hear it? The very symbol of freedom was suddenly painted as worthless. The passport that was meant to open doors was now accused of closing them. Imagine, my brothers and sisters, a young student in Ouagadougou who had danced with joy when she received her new passport, preparing her application to study in Paris, only to hear the news that France would not honor it. Imagine a trader in Niamey, ready to cross into Europe with goods to sell, suddenly told her document was nothing but a piece of paper. Imagine a family in Bamako, desperate for medical treatment for their child, paralyzed by fear that the border would send them back. This was not merely politics. This was personal. Pride turned into panic. Celebration turned into suspicion. And what gave the rumors power was not only their content but their source. These were not faceless whispers. They were printed in respected newspapers. They were broadcast on mainstream radio. They were echoed by international outlets with names the world had learned to trust. And so, many ordinary citizens believed them. If the French press says so, it must be true. If the international radio repeats it, who am I to question? Thus, within days, the story shifted. In the streets of Bamako, cafes no longer buzzed with excitement but with doubt. In Niamey's markets, traders questioned whether their leaders had moved too fast. In Ouagadougou, critics used the moment to accuse governments of chasing symbols instead of substance. Commentators abroad declared the AES reckless, fragile, destined to collapse. For an alliance barely weeks old, the wound was deep. Doubt is more corrosive than rejection. For rejection you can fight against, but doubt eats you from the inside. But hear me, silence is deadly in politics. The governments of the Sahel knew they could not let the storm rage without an answer. And so, they rose to respond. Mali moved first. Its Ministry of Security issued a statement, calm yet firm. They explained that embassies and consulates around the world had already been informed of the AES passport. Copies had been delivered. The truth was simple. The problem was not rejection, but delay. The passport had to be integrated into the electronic systems of foreign offices. Until that was done, applications would face slowdowns. But once updated, visas would flow as normal. In other words, it was bureaucracy, not betrayal. Yet, beloved, when a fire has already burned, a bucket of water cannot erase the ashes. Many had already read the frightening headlines. Many had already lost their faith. A technical explanation could not restore a shaken heart. Then came a turning point. On the 26th day of February, the Chinese embassy in Mali broke the silence. It issued a statement that shook the airwaves. China denied the rumors outright. It declared that delays were normal with any new document, And most importantly, it affirmed that it fully recognized the AES passport's validity. Now the same newspapers that had carried the whispers were forced to print corrections. The same radio stations that repeated the lies now had to tell the truth. Headlines shifted. The narrative cracked. The tide began to turn. But still, the damage was not undone. For even when the truth arrives, the echo of the lie remains. Students continued to hesitate. Traders delayed their journeys. Families still feared the humiliation of rejection. And critics, both at home and abroad, pointed to the chaos and said, "See? This is what happens when you defy the West." Oh, my friends, do you see it? This was more than a passport. This was a battlefield. Not of guns and tanks, but of perception and propaganda. A war fought in headlines, in whispers, in the fragile trust of ordinary people. And so the question rose higher. Could the AES withstand the storm? Could 3 young nations bear the weight of international doubt? Could their people cling to hope while the world's papers declared their failure? For the rumors had done their work. The West rejects, so the people questioned. The world denied, so the world watched. And the struggle of the AES was no longer only about travel. It was about survival of trust. Beloved, let us pause and look at the scars left behind. For though the storm of rumor began to fade, the damage had already struck deep. Words, once spoken, are like arrows. Even when the shooter apologizes, the wound remains. And so it was with the AES passport. Across the Sahel, families carried their fears in silence. In Bamako, students whispered to one another, "Shall I risk applying for a visa with this new passport? What if they laugh at me at the consulate?" In Niamey's markets, traders hesitated, delaying their journeys, fearing their goods would spoil before borders opened. In Ouagadougou, families postponed medical trips, terrified that a border officer would stamp "rejected" on their child's hope. It was not just about travel. It was about dignity. When doubt enters the heart, dignity trembles. And that is what the rumors had done. They had stolen confidence from the people. Inside the countries, critics seized the moment. Opposition voices said, "You rushed into symbolism. You wanted flags, passports, big ceremonies, but you did not prepare the systems. You did not think of the people. And now, ordinary men and women pay the price." Outside the region, Western commentators echoed the same, declaring the AES reckless, immature, destined to collapse. And even in Africa, some neighboring states began to whisper, "Should we distance ourselves from these 3 before the storm reaches us too?" Oh, my friends, perception can be more dangerous than reality. A passport legally recognized means little if the world believes it is not. In the theater of global politics, truth walks slowly, but rumor runs fast. Yet, hear this. Every wound can give birth to resilience. In the very moment when doubt seemed strongest, a new spirit began to rise among the people. Students in Bamako gathered in their unions. They did not sit quietly in despair. No, they held forums. They educated their peers. They explained the difference between bureaucratic delays and outright rejection. They said, "Do not be deceived. The passport is valid. The problem is not legality. The problem is procedure." Civil society groups in Niamey and Ouagadougou took to the radio waves. They used their voices to educate the masses about international law, about recognition, about how easily perception can be manipulated. They told their listeners, "If they spread lies about us, it is because they fear us. If they try to make us doubt, it is because we are rising." And something unexpected began to happen. Instead of abandoning the passport, more people sought it out. By March of 2025, applications for the AES passport had surged nearly 30% higher than the launch month. What was meant to discourage had inspired. What was meant to weaken had strengthened. The passport had become more than a travel document. It was now a test of faith, a badge of resistance, a rallying cry of sovereignty. Think of it. A simple booklet with a chip and a photo had been turned into a battlefield of narratives. The West said worthless. China said recognized. The government said legal. The people said ours. And in that clash of voices, the passport became a mirror of Africa's eternal struggle, to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. But the pain was not erased. For trust, once broken, is slow to heal. Many still hesitated. Many still questioned. Leaders were accused of chasing symbols while their citizens suffered delays. Commentators abroad continued to scoff, and even as demand rose, the wound of doubt remained visible. My brothers and sisters, here lies the lesson. Sovereignty is never smooth. Freedom is always tested. Dignity is always challenged. The AES Passport had survived its first storm, but the scars of that storm would remain for years to come. And so we must ask, what is more dangerous to a young nation? Is it the lie that comes from abroad, or the silence that comes from within? Is it the enemy that spreads disinformation, or the leaders who fail to prepare their people for the storm? For the battle was not yet over. The passport had been defended, yes. Demand had grown, yes. But outside the Sahel, powerful nations were watching, measuring, calculating, and their question was this: if 3 small nations can resist today, what will stop 10 or 20 from resisting tomorrow? Beloved, the storm did not end at the borders of Mali, Niger, or Burkina Faso. No, it traveled. It echoed through the corridors of Washington, through the meeting rooms of Brussels, through the policy papers of Paris. For the rise of the AES Passport was not merely a local matter. It was a challenge to a global order that has long assumed Africa must always wait for permission. In Washington, analysts sharpened their pens. Reports flowed into think tanks and embassies. They warned that the Sahel had set a dangerous precedent. If 3 nations could defy ECOWAS, reject dependency, and craft their own alliance, then what would stop others? What if Guinea, or Chad, or even Nigeria one day decided to walk a similar path? What if the continent itself began to imagine unity outside of Western-led structures? For America, the passport was not just paper. It was a signal flare. It was a warning that Africa was beginning to step beyond the scripts written for it. In Brussels, the reaction was cautious, even fearful. Europe had long preferred Africa as a junior partner, not an equal. And here were 3 nations standing up, not with aid requests, but with institutions, with sovereignty, with their own identity. European newspapers had been quick to echo the rumors of rejection, and now governments had to face the truth. The AES passport was real, legitimate, and growing in popularity. To admit this was to admit that Europe's grip was slipping. In Paris, the concern ran deeper still. For France, the Sahel had long been a sphere of influence, a region bound by history and dependency. Now the former colonies declared a future without Paris at the helm. The AES passport was a small document, but it carried the weight of revolution. It was as if 3 voices had cried out together. We are no longer children of France. We are nations of our own, and to the French establishment that cry was both a humiliation and a warning. But look east, beloved, and see another story. In Beijing, the reaction was not rejection, but recognition. The Chinese embassy's statement of support was no small thing. It reassured the Sahel that they were not alone. It reminded the world that Africa had partners ready to affirm, not deny, its sovereignty. And beyond China, across Asia, Latin America, and the wider global South, the AES passport was greeted with respect. Commentators in Brazil, in India, in South Africa spoke of it as a symbol of dignity, an example of nations refusing to bow. Thus, the world divided in its gaze. The West saw danger. The South saw hope. The powerful feared instability. The humble saw inspiration. And so the question remains, my brothers and sisters, is the world truly ready for an Africa that no longer asks permission, but makes its own decisions? If 3 nations can shake the order, what happens when the whole continent rises? Beloved, we have seen the storm. We have felt the whispers of rejection, the sting of doubt, the trembling of trust. Yet we have also witnessed resilience, the rising of a people who refused to surrender their dignity. And now the question stands before us like a mountain. Where do we go from here? The AES passport is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. For behind that little booklet lies a greater vision. A vision of an Africa no longer divided by artificial borders, no longer bound by foreign dictates, but united by its own institutions. Already, the Alliance of Sahel States has spoken of building more: a central bank to guard its wealth, a judiciary to defend its justice, a defense pact to protect its sovereignty. These are not dreams, my brothers and sisters. These are foundations being laid in real time. The passport is a key, but what door will it open? Will it lead to new opportunities for students, traders, and families across the Sahel? Will it inspire other African nations to rise, to form their own alliances, to demand respect without apology? Or will it invite greater pressure from the West, greater attempts to undermine, to destabilize, to divide? Look closely, and you will see that the struggle is not only political, it is spiritual. It is the age-old struggle of dignity against domination, of freedom against fear. Each citizen who lines up for an AES passport is not just seeking a document. They are casting a vote for sovereignty. They are testifying with their hands and their hearts. We believe in our own future. And so, beloved, the road ahead is both bright and dangerous. For if the AES succeeds, others will follow. But if it fails, the cynics will laugh, the enemies will rejoice, and the doubters will say, Africa is not ready. The stakes are high. The journey is long. The eyes of the world are watching. So I leave you with this question. Will the Sahel Alliance endure the weight of history, or will it stumble beneath the pressure of the world? Will the AES passport remain a symbol of defiance, or will it be remembered as a fragile experiment? The answer, my brothers and sisters, has not yet been written. It will be written in the choices of leaders, in the courage of citizens, and in the solidarity of nations willing to walk together. Beloved, we have walked through the fire of this story. We have seen a passport become more than paper. We have seen it transform into a banner of defiance, a vessel of dignity, a testimony of sovereignty. And though the world whispered, West rejects, though headlines shouted doubt and fear, the people of the Sahel answered with courage. They lined up, they applied, they carried that booklet not as a burden, but as a blessing. The truth, my brothers and sisters, is that AES Passport's story is not only about borders. It is about belief. It is about a people declaring, we will not wait for permission. We will not live under the shadow of another. We will write our own name in the book of nations. And this truth cannot be silenced by rumor, cannot be denied by rejection, cannot be erased by fear. From Bamako to Niamey, from Ouagadougou to every village where hope rises, the passport stands as a witness. It says to the world, sovereignty is not granted in Paris or Brussels, sovereignty is claimed in the hearts of the people. And in the Sahel, that claim has been made. But hear me, the struggle is not finished. For every step forward invites new resistance. For every declaration of freedom, there will be voices of doubt. The question is not whether West rejects today, but whether Africa will stand tomorrow. So I ask you, my brothers and sisters, what do you see when you look at this story? Do you see weakness, or do you see resilience? Do you see a fragile experiment, or do you see the birth of a new era? The future is unwritten, the journey is long, but the spirit of the people is strong. And if we stand together, if we speak truth louder than lies, then no rejection, no headline, no power on earth can stop Africa's awakening. If this message has stirred your heart, I invite you. Subscribe, join this family of truth seekers, and leave your voice in the comments below. Tell us, can Africa stand tall without asking permission? For the passport may be small, but its meaning is mighty. And the story of freedom, beloved, is only just beginning.